Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well. So, in one of my past videos, I had criticized a vegan activist YouTuber by the name of Ask Yourself for criticizing Blair White for no longer being vegan. And his entire strategy was to use sophistry and fallacies to try to demonstrate that she only had two options, right? Go back to eating vegan, or he was going to prove that she's a bad person. And he seems to do this in all of his debates, and he's engineered this little trick to try to do just that. And this trick is hashtag name the trait. And the essence of name the trait is exactly what I just said, right? Either he convinces you to become a vegan, or he proves that you're a bad person according to yourself. Now, a while back, he sent out a challenge to YouTube skeptic community, I suppose, to try to take him up on name the trait. And I guess some people have. But I contacted him and I said I wanted to debate him live, but he ignored me. It's whatever. I figured, I wanted to wait to make this video, but hoping that he would want to talk to me at some point live. But then I realized that in that one video that I had made about him and Blair White, I dropped the phrase that if he were to ever see that video, he would immediately probably block me and not want to ever deal with me, because I kind of inadvertently and unknowingly, I suppose, I kind of gave away my game plan. So I'm just going to make this video and I'm going to debunk his entire debating strategy as a non-starter. Okay? Just one big fucking fallacy. It's just a conglomerate of fallacies all woven into one big fucking disgusting fallacy, man. So, without any further ado, let's introduce you to what this name the trait thing is.
Here are 23 common...
God, I can't listen to this guy. Anyway, so he's basically arguing for animal moral value, right? Trying to prove that eating animals is immoral, in other words. And his first premise is that humans are of moral value. No problems there, I suppose. You could challenge that, but I don't care to. Premise number two is that there is no trait absent in animals, which, if absent in humans, will cause us to deem ourselves valueless. And from these two premises, right, you have to agree with them or prove them wrong. But if you can't prove them wrong, from these two premises follows the conclusion, namely that without establishing the absence of such a trait in animals, we contradict ourselves, right, by deeming animals valueless. So again, if you can't prove this wrong, what he just posited here, you contradict yourself within your own moral framework, and you're just a bad person. Or your other choice is to stop eating animal products. But anyway, so just to give you an example and help you understand this line of reasoning, he asks for a trait that if it's not in animals, this trait, or it's not there, which is why you eat them, right? So if we could take that trait out of people, you'd basically have to eat them too, right? So for example, some people have tried to say that, well, animals they lack intelligent, right? Which is very vague and has no threshold. And there are a lot of problems with that to begin with, right? But that's not what... We don't even need to go down any of these quagmires and allow this guy any foothold, because the whole thing is just foolish. All these premises and this entire name the trait argument is just a fallacy, man. It's just a fallacy. But anyway, so, some people would say, well, animals aren't as intelligent, right? And then he would say, okay, fine. Then you should be able to kill and eat retards, because retards are not as intelligent as the general population, right? And if you're not willing to say that it's okay to kill and eat retards, right, enslave them, fatten them up, do all that we do to animals, if you're saying that that's not okay, then you're morally inconsistent and you better start eating vegan or you're a bad person. That's essentially the strategy that he uses. And a lot of people fall for this bullshit, apparently. But I'm not going to, because this whole thing, as I stated in another video, is a fallacy known as shifting the burden of proof. So I said basically that vegans, the burden of proof is on them, right? Because they are less than 1% of the global population. I know there's other statistics out there that tell you otherwise, but they're all bullshit. It's less than 1% of the world that's truly vegan. And in reality, no one's ever vegan. Okay, but that's another story. Anyway, because they are a tiny, tiny, tiny portion of the population, and they are trying to put basically the 99% on a fucking diet. That's essentially what they're trying to do. The burden of proof is clearly on them, right? And this name the trait tactic basically encapsulates the entire vegan ideology. It's the entire vegan ideology in a nutshell. They're shifting the burden of proof on you by saying you're a bad person and you have to submit because you should be a good person like they are. That's basically what they're doing. And name the trait is just the essence of veganism. So let's debunk it real quick. Burden of proof philosophy. The burden of proof is the obligation on a party in a dispute to provide sufficient warrant for their position, right? Holder of the burden. So who does the burden of proof fall on in a debate? When two parties are in a discussion and one makes a claim that the other disputes, the one who makes the claim typically has a burden of proof to justify or substantiate that claim, especially when it challenges the perceived status quo. So the status quo is eating meat, eating animal products, right? That's the status quo, and vegans are challenging it, right? So the burden of proof is on them. So this entire name the trait strategy is, in and of itself, the entire thing is shifting the burden of proof, right? He's trying to get omnivores to prove to him why they should be omnivores when they're already omnivores and they have the numbers on them, right? Shit, they could eat these grass-fed vegans if they wanted to. Just joking. Just joking. Anyway, so, or in other words, as stated by some guy named Carl Sagan, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, right? You're making an extraordinary claim trying to change the entire world's diet. You need to back it with some evidence. Not tell us why we can't eat meat, because guess what? We can. It's really simple shit, right? Right. Anyway, so shifting the burden of proof. One way in which one would attempt to shift the burden of proof is by committing a logical fallacy known as the argument from ignorance. It occurs when either a proposition is assumed to be true because it has not yet been proved false, or a proposition is assumed to be false because it has not yet been proved true. So when he says that there is no trait absent in animals, which if absent in humans would cause us to deem ourselves valueless, right? He's saying that because this proposition has not yet been proved false, it has to be true, right? So we could right off the bat, P2, proposition number 2, is a fallacy. It doesn't make any sense. It's a logical fallacy because it assumes that something that has not yet been proved false is actually true, right? We have to agree that the premises are true for the conclusion to follow, right? From these premises. So right then and there, the whole thing falls apart. I mean, it fell apart in the first place because it's just a fallacy to begin with. But right then and there, you see another attempt, a slightly different attempt to shift the burden of proof, right? And then when you look at C, the conclusion he draws, because he stacked so much bullshit on top of bullshit, C, his conclusion is bullshit as well. Why? Well, because he says, therefore, without establishing the absence of such a trait, right, we contradict ourselves. So basically, he's saying you couldn't prove a negative. Proving a negative is another fallacy that's, shifting the burden of proof, or it's related. It's part of that whole fallacy. And it states basically that you cannot prove a negative, okay? It's pseudo-logic. It's not logic. It's phony logic. You cannot prove a negative. It's a fallacy. He's asking you to prove the absence of something, right? He's asking you to prove a negative. So it's as if he went to the Wikipedia page of burden of proof and basically structured his entire argument, named a trait, following all these fallacies. So P2 is a fallacy, C is a fallacy. The whole assumption that, the meat eaters should be defending themselves is a fallacy in the first place. So this is just bullshit on top of bullshit on top of bullshit. And all you get is bullshit squared, right? It's just a big pile of fucking bullshit. Ask yourself. So unless you revise your entire argumentative strategy, your logical approach to this debate, unless you revise it completely and come from a different angle that's not fallacious, you better start eating meat, motherfucker, or you're just a bad person. Anyway, just fucking around a little bit. But this guy loves to talk about and how people in debates with him are intellectually dishonest, and he just attacks them, calls them names, and he seems to be very, very anti-intellectual dishonesty. So was it a projection because he knows all his premises are bullshit? Right? His entire line of reasoning is fallacious. Was he just projecting that onto other people because that's who he is? Or did he just make a mistake? And if that's the case, well, whatever the case may be, he really needs to readjust, apologize, and fix his entire strategy and come from a different angle. Or otherwise, well, I think we'd have to say he's intellectually dishonest, right? At any rate, ask yourself whether you respond to this video or ignore me. Hopefully, people in future debates bring this up and destroy your entire line of reasoning because it's a non-fucking starter. And to be quite frank, you, as the preeminent vegan philosopher, have just been schooled by a goat farmer. Thank you for listening.